opponent, fighting out of the blue corner, standing 6 foot 1 inches tall, weighing in at 187 pounds, from Anchorage, Alaska, with an unblemished MMA record of 5 wins and no defeats, representing the AK Wolfpack, Rob the Monster Yundt!
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today, our guest is Alaska State Senator Rob Yundt. Rob was born and raised in Wasilla and stumbled into wrestling as a 7th grader. Little did he know that wrestling would change his life, ultimately leading to a career as a professional mixed martial arts fighter with a professional record of 9 wins and 5 losses. His match against Ricardo Almeida in 2008, which is available on YouTube, was a pay-per-view event streamed live from Mandalay Bay Casino in Las Vegas and was watched by millions of people worldwide. After a couple decades of managing his own construction companies, he ran for the MatSu Borough Assembly and won, serving from 2020 to 2024. And last year, he ran against and defeated incumbent Wasilla Senator David Wilson. We talk about all of that and his bill that would close the S-Corp loophole that allows certain companies to pay less taxes than others. Senator Rob Yundt, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So you were born and raised in Wasilla, right?
Yes, my family originally came to the Valley sometime in the 40s. Well, my great-grandpa, I can remember him, right? I think he passed when I was maybe 6 or 7. He came up in the 40s. He had family that came before then. So we've been there a while.
Prior to statehood?
Yes, much prior. Yeah.
And you grew up in a mobile home park?
I did, yeah. So my parents split when I was 4. They're best friends now. Everything's good. But, it's less fiscally efficient when there's 2 homes to be funded, right? 2 sets of utilities and two rents or 2 mortgages. Yeah, it's what my mom could do at the time. She's the hardest worker I've ever met in my life. She's in her 60s and still puts in 80 to 100-hour weeks every summer.
Yeah, she's working in the building.
No,
sorry,
yeah.
That's your mother-in-law.
Yeah, my mother-in-law is working for one of the representatives. She's retired from BP and just has a ton of expertise in office.
Gotcha.
Right? So, but no, my mom's a construction worker.
Oh, really?
And still in her mid-60s is working 80, 100-hour weeks all summer. She's an animal. She's the hardest worker I ever met. She's my hero. My mom is unequivocally my hero. Hardest worker I ever met.
Did you have siblings?
Yeah, I got 1 little brother. Yeah, we're nine months apart.
Oh, wow.
Almost 10. I always joke here, by the way, girls should not have kids that close together. I don't think that was very good for my mom. I always joked that I was so good looking they couldn't wait to have us. Said they had my brother and it was game over. But yeah, Josh and I are almost 10 months apart.
And did you grow up with a relationship with your dad?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He never went away. Yep. I will say, and then this is just I'm not trying to knock the system, but back then dads weren't really given 50% custody. My dad should have had it. And I think my mom would admit that now. My dad should have had us half the time, right? But it just wasn't how it was back then. But he never went away. He got every other weekend, half the summer. And eventually when Josh and I got old enough, we just started staying with him half the time. But he treats my mom like gold. They get along great. And they're phenomenal grandparents together. They just weren't meant to be, right? Mm-hmm. Where we all travel together, vacation. We do everything together. It's awesome. It's wonderful.
You graduated from high school in Wasilla?
Yeah, Wasilla High School. Many moons ago, 1998.
And had you been a wrestler growing up?
Yeah, I found the sport in 7th grade. It found me, actually. I was getting in trouble in school. And I have a strong belief that there's no such thing as a bad kid. My entire life is dedicated to helping kids. And I don't think I was a bad kid. I think I had too much energy. And one of the wrestling coaches at Colony Middle School approached me and gave me 2 options. You're going to get expelled from school or you're going to start wrestling. And that's how the sport I didn't find the sport found me. Best thing that ever happened to me. I suddenly cared about my grades. I wanted to be eligible. I didn't want to get in trouble. Every kid needs an outlet. I don't care if it's choir or band or a sport. It doesn't matter to me. Every child needs an outlet. They need something to keep them busy and put them to bed tired at night.
Mm-hmm. So you started wrestling in 7th grade. Were you naturally good at it to begin with? Or
I don't know if I was good. I just worked hard because I just wanted to catch up to my peers that have been doing it their whole life. And so you always had the next kid that was...
There's kids who start wrestling prior to 7th grade? That seems early.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kids that start in club. It's called club. Mm-hmm. Like you have club hockey, club wrestling, mm-hmm. club in every sport. So they get started at 5 years old. The youngest or the earliest divisions for wrestling in USA Wrestling is 5 and 6, which you have to be 4 years old turning 5. So yeah, kids do get started early.
Did you start your kids that early?
Yes and no. So I lied. I fibbed to my oldest son and told him there was no such thing as wrestling until middle school. I didn't want him to get involved early because I don't want to see kids get burnt out. He found out that I was quote unquote mistaken in 3rd grade or 4th grade when a letter came home from one of the local clubs and it was in his backpack. He started then, and he kept a really good balance between wrestling and hockey. Ended up putting most of his time towards hockey, but kept the balance and won a couple of youth state titles growing up, placed at Western Regionals once. He was decent. He could have been really good if he put a lot of time into it, but he loved hockey, and that's cool. My younger son, I couldn't fib to him because his older brother was doing it. So Regan's been wrestling since he was,
5.
Yeah. And he's doing pretty good.
Were you like a champion in high school for wrestling?
Actually, so I was the number 1 seed at the state tournament my junior and senior year. I went down to Tulsa Nationals. I didn't start till 7th grade. By my sophomore year, I placed 5th at a tournament called Tulsa Nationals, which is the biggest youth folk style tournament in the country for freshmen and sophomores. Then my junior year, I took 3rd at what was considered the toughest folk style national tournament in the country. Beat a 2-timer from Oklahoma, beat a 1-timer from California, did pretty good. I came home, I blew my knee out the next week. And so I went to the state.
Like your ACL or?
A couple things in there, yeah. So I went to.
While wrestling?
Yeah, in practice. It was just an accident. Things happen. Forfeited out of the tournament my junior year, senior year. Ended up in the finals against a kid I beat by 12 or 13 the week before, and my knee came back out in the finals again. So it was the best thing ever happened to me, honestly. Like, I wanted to go to college, be a school teacher, and be a wrestling coach. That's what I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't have met my first wife, Nicole, if I was in college. So it was the best thing ever happened. And we had 3 beautiful kids. We're still best friends today and travel and do everything together. Life happens for a reason. And if wrestling and sports taught me one thing, it's this, that we're not in control of everything and that you need to adapt and overcome. And you really got to be able to rebound on the fly and make the most of every situation, right? So I think wrestling taught me that. And I've been coaching now for the last 21 years, helping kids out in the Valley, all the way from Houston to Palmer. And our club that I help at has kids from all over, right? So we're putting kids to bed tired at night, giving them an outlet, keeping them out of trouble, giving them a reason to keep their grades up, right? So my journey was meant to go the way that it went, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to learn more about your journey. I guess, I watched videos of you on YouTube.
Oh boy.
Fighting in Vegas. How did you become a professional mixed martial art fighter?
That was a dare, an accident. I was in Las Vegas, went down to watch Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell fight with some friends, and I guess it would have been 04, 05. I think it was 05.
And so you were like 23, 24 years old?
Yeah, 24 probably. And just sitting there, and the guys that I was with were competing and very good at what they did, and they were competing. I didn't have time. At that point in my life, I was a single father. I did have 50-50 custody.
And had you gone to college?
No, when I got hurt my junior year of high school, that basically ended my wrestling career.
Got it.
That effectively ended my wrestling career. And so years later, though, by then, physical therapy, rehab, all the good stuff.
Right.
I'd aged and matured. I wind up in Vegas with some friends.
And so you just been working? I'm just talking between high school and what were you doing?
Yeah. I went to the oil field. My first job in the oil field was January 99, making $7 an hour. And just worked my way up from there. It did not want to be a carpenter. My dad's a world-class carpenter, but I didn't want to be a carpenter. I wanted to be a school teacher and a wrestling coach. That's all I wanted to do. That's all I want to do to this day. If you look at my hobbies in life, that's what I do. I help kids, right? I'm not a teacher, but I'm in the hallways constantly. I'm very involved in all of our schools out there and coaching kids. And I just went to work and figured it out, got married and had a family at a young age. That was not intentional. Nicole and I did not mean to get pregnant with our first daughter. It was the best thing ever happened to both of us.
How old were you when you had your first daughter?
I had just turned 20. And it's crazy how fast time flies, but she's getting ready to graduate law school in 2 months. She's down in Idaho.
Oh, congrats.
My oldest daughter. I just went to work and figured it out. By default, became a carpenter like my dad. And just the first house that me and my brother built was actually build my mom a new house. And then we built my grandma a house. And then my brother and I built our first house together to sell. And I was doing this on the side of working, right? And then just finally woke up one day and realized that for me to be a better dad, I needed to be home more. Mm-hmm. I did a 16-week hitch out of town one day, right? And an 11-week hitch and a 9-week hitch and a whole bunch of 6s. It was very hard on Nicole and I and the kids, but I knew that I needed to get us ahead in life, right? And so the sacrifices have to be made. And so I just woke up. I came back one day. I had just been gone for 9 weeks. I came home and I was working in town for a few days. And my boss asked me, he's like, hey, man, can you do me a huge favor and go out to Kotzebue and help on this job here? And I said, absolutely, sir. I work for you. I'll do whatever you tell me. But it just came out of my mouth like diarrhea. I didn't mean for it to happen. But I said, but just so you know, leave me out there till we're done with the project. Because when I come home, I'm starting my own company. I had never thought about it. I went home that night and I was bawling. I was telling Nicole, I'm like, I just quit my job. I put in my notice. I'm an idiot. I'm an absolute moron. I know what the hell I just did. We had tough days getting the company started, but it worked out. I've never missed my kids' birthdays. I don't miss hockey games. I don't miss volleyball games. I don't miss wrestling matches. There was a lot of sacrifice that went into it, but it's where I needed to be.
So you started your own construction company?
Yeah, at 24. Yeah, I was 24 years old when we started. And
that's the same time you went to Vegas.
Yeah, about the same time I went with some friends, and Nicole and I had split. We were doing 50-50 custody. We've done that since day one.
So you had 3 kids right before you turned 20 and 24.
Yeah.
So pretty much back to back.
Yep. Beautiful kids. Amazing. I'm down there watching a competition, and obviously I am grateful that I got hurt in high school because I would not have met Nicole if I hadn't. But I'd be lying if I said I don't still have the itch to compete. Even today at 44 years old, I promise you I still have the itch to compete. It's in my DNA. And I was sitting there with some friends and I just said, man, I could beat most of these guys. And they laughed. They're like, no, you couldn't. I promise you I can't. 2 years later, I was back at Mandalay Bay in front of millions of people on pay-per-view. You know what I mean? So for me, I went home, started training with them to help them on the wrestling. Fell in love with other parts of the sport that I didn't understand. I didn't do martial arts growing up. I just wrestled, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
And then crazy world that you live in. But I literally went from watching Tito fight to living with Tito off and on for 4 months to help him and I get ready for 2 of our next fights in the UFC a couple years later. I'd fly back and forth to train and live with Tito in California and then come home to have my custody of my kids and go back and forth. But it was honestly, it was a midlife crisis.
At age 24.
I joke that it was, right? For me, it was a way to keep my mind occupied and stay active when I didn't have my kids. Does that make sense? Because you see a lot of young parents, they split up and they just hit the market, whatever you want to call it. They're at the bars all the time when they don't have their kids. They're out in the scene. That's not me, man. That wasn't me. I wasn't really interested in that. I missed competing. I liked teaching and coaching. And so it was an opportunity for me to help people that were, say, good at kickboxing, learn how to wrestle, and then they could help me at kickboxing. It was a total accident, but it was fun while it lasted. There was no money in the sport. I've been, ever since then, trying to help athletes. They need to get a collective bargaining agreement together. So I don't know how much you know about professional sports, but in every major organization, football, baseball, basketball, soccer, all of them, the athletes get somewhere between 48 and 52% of revenue, and then the owners get between 48 and 52. In mixed martial arts or the UFC, it's 83-17, 85-15, 90-10 each year. And there's a class action lawsuit going to based on a monopoly that people may perceive. We'll see where it goes. But the bottom line is these kids aren't making enough money, right? I'm not getting off the couch for under $100,000. It ain't happening. If I got to spend 16 weeks getting in shape and go get punched in the face, I'm not doing it for under $100,000, right? But there's kids out there doing this for at the highest level of the sport in the UFC for $10,000 a night. You can 10, 15 grand sounds, oh, you got 15 grand to fight. That's not much money. And you can only really compete at a high level about 3 times a year. And still until there is a collective bargaining agreement for the athletes in that sport, like there is in all the other sports, there's not going to be any money in it for the athletes.
I don't really follow MMA. It's not something that I know a lot about. And I made some assumptions. And so I did some Googling, and there were some surprising things that came out. Like I assumed that the injuries from MMA would be worse than other sports, and that's not true.
They're way less.
They're way less. And it was interesting because I was reading like some studies on why that is, and they actually, it's like the whole idea that one of the reasons why American football is so dangerous is because there's so much padding, there's so much big helmets that people will hit each other harder than they would if they didn't, and like the sort of.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
So I'll use boxing as an example.
Okay.
Because it's probably the most similar sport, right? Although you could tie some rugby and football has similarities as well. But let's use boxing. In the sport of boxing, which, by the way, I would never let one of my children do, at least at a competitive level,
because you feel like boxing is way more dangerous.
Well, 100 times more dangerous than MMA. So you can only hit them in one of two places, the body or the head. That's all you can do. And most of the shots are going to be to the head. And if you drop somebody and hurt them and they're unable to intelligently defend themselves, they stop the fight and give them 10 seconds to recover and then let you do this over and over and over and over, right? In our sport, mixed martial arts, it stops the first time that happens, right? And then if somebody's really good at boxing, then
meaning, somebody gets knocked down for a second, somebody's
like
down,
boxing.
It's over. In MMA.
In MMA, the first time that happens, the fight ends. You don't get to stand up and get your eyes straightened out and keep going. That is dangerous as heck. And so the first time you get hurt bad in mixed martial arts, the fight ends. In boxing, it can happen over and over and over and over. So in the history of mixed martial arts, I believe there's still only been one death. And he couldn't even get sanctioned to fight in most states before that because he had issues, health issues. In boxing, there's been hundreds and hundreds of deaths, right? Including one in a girl fight one time in Colorado about 12 years ago. There was a young girl that passed away after the fight because you're just getting hit in the head over and over and over and over. And the ref will stop the fight, give you 5, 8, 9 seconds to recover. But they're the longest seconds in the sport, too, if you watch them count, right? Or in the world. And so anyways, it's just a much more dangerous sport, boxing is. And the numbers don't lie, right? Just look at the amount of deaths and concussion protocol and different things, right? I am glad to see concussion protocol in the UFC now and even in the NFL, right? They've cleaned that sport up a lot, too, man. They're hitting quarterbacks a second after they throw the ball. Right. It used to be a 15-yard penalty. They would take that. Now it's like you might be out for a couple of games. They've cleaned that sport up a lot, too. It's good to see. At the end of the day, it is a sport and people are paying to watch it, but you have to take care of the athletes, too. You can't just send them down the road concussed over and over and over and over. You can't do that, or you shouldn't do that. I'm glad to see that all the sports are evolving in that sense, where safety is a big issue for the athletes.
So you went and watched that fight. You told your friends, "Hey, I could beat these guys." Yeah. They laughed.
Yeah.
From that moment to your first fight, how long was that, and how did you prepare for the first fight? And did you have to prove yourself early on?
Yeah, I think I had. I don't know. A lot of in the early days of the sport, a lot of your fights aren't actually on your record because the promoters wouldn't send the information in or whatever. But I think I had 9 or 10 fights between then when I came home and when I wound up back at Mandalay Bay.
In Alaska?
Yeah, back at And when I wound up, it was a little over 2 years between when we watched the competition in Vegas and when I was back there competing. It was not probably the best advised situation. I will say this. It was getting hard to get competition in Alaska. So I was willing to compete at any weight between 170 and 265.
And you were like 185?
Yeah, I walked around a little heavier than that, but I hadn't competed at 70 yet. I was competing at 185 up to heavyweight. And so.
And PS for listeners, because I watched YouTube videos where you got introduced and they said your weight.
Oh, geez. Yeah. If I was trying to make a good decision on my career, if I had looked at it like a career, I would have done two things different. One, I would have went to the UFC at 170. Welterweight, right? Because I can tell you when you stand me next to true UFC middleweights, I'm not, right? I weigh 225 today. So you say, how can you make 170? It's not that hard, right? I competed really well at that weight afterwards. And then I was supposed to go into season 7 of the Ultimate Fighter reality show. And then I got a call 3 days before a UFC 81 saying, hey, so-and-so got sick. And do you want to fill in and compete against Ricardo Almeida? At the time, Ricardo was top 3, top 4 in the world. They were bringing him in to fight Anderson Silva for a world title. They just needed to get him. It was his first time in the UFC, so they needed to get him a win or two in the organization, get the fans familiar with him. And I said, absolutely. And my manager's Ken, great guy, lives down in Huntington Beach. He's like, this is a really bad decision if you're looking at this as a career. You're taking a fight on 72 hours notice against one of the best guys in the history of the sport. Whereas if you go into the reality show, you get to compete against young guys that don't have a lot of experience, and you might actually just win the show. Or you're definitely going to be one of the best people.
And you'll be famous.
Yeah, and I said, honestly, I'm not doing this as a career. This is for fun, and I don't want to be away from my kids for 6 weeks, so get my ass on a plane. That was it. I was in Seattle at the time training. I was on a plane at the Seattle airport 3 hours later in Vegas that night and fighting on Saturday. And I got no regrets. I wouldn't do it any other way. If I wanted to make it,
Because you lost.
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I think I watched that fight, actually.
It says how little I knew about jiu-jitsu at the time. Is I didn't even know that. I knew if the fight stayed standing, I would win. Guaranteed I was going to win. And I showed that early on in the fight. It was not going to go Ricardo's way if we stayed on our feet. I knew so little about the sport of jiu-jitsu at the time. I didn't know anything about it. That I thought if I don't shoot and if I don't try to take him down to the mat, then we won't go there. Right. And so when he shot his first takedown attempt, I was not even prepared. I was standing straight up and down like a kickboxer. And that's how little I knew about the sport at the time. I was pretty naive to it. But yeah, all in fun.
Well, was that the end of your career?
No, I competed again in the UFC one more time at middleweight. Came out of the UFC, was going to drop down to welterweight, did compete at welterweight, beat a guy that will go on to win a fight in the UFC later, but I just couldn't justify putting no time into it. I think the most I ever made on a fight was 15 grand in a night, right? At the time, right? I can't justify putting time into something if I'm going to spend time away from my children and I can't put food on the table.
Like, how many hours a day were you having to train?
I never trained.
You never trained?
No, I barely ever trained. And when I did, I would just work on kickboxing. And then after the UFC, when I realized I should probably start training jiu-jitsu, then I started training that, right?
And you had people that train jiu-jitsu with you?
Yeah,
in Wasilla?
great. No, in Anchorage. World-class guys. Anchorage, ABJJ, Anchorage Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Anchorage is actually a world-class jiu-jitsu gym. And it's got an amazing kids program now. But the other thing I never stopped during this whole time is I never stopped coaching kids. We only have so many hours in the day. And in my world, everybody else comes before me. It's just how it works.
In the intro that I'm playing at the start of your show today, they say part of the AK Wolfpack. Was there an AK Wolfpack, or was there like a group of you guys training up here?
Yeah, and there's a few guys that fought in Vegas. We had a bunch of really good guys, young guys. They're all phenomenal husbands and family men now. But yeah, that was the group that I'd went to Vegas with, and they were already competing. They were already participating in the sport. And when I told a couple of them I could compete at this level, and they chuckled, they laughed. But
prove them wrong.
I was back 2 years later, and honestly, all of us, none of us could put enough time into the sport. There just wasn't enough money in it. We had families to feed. And so some people play men's league basketball. Some people play men's league softball to help stay in shape and have fun with your friends. Some people get punched in the face. For me, it was men's league basketball, except not basketball. That's all it was.
It was just like a hobby.
It was just for fun. Yeah. And a way to spend time with my friends and stay in shape.
And you kept running your construction company.
Oh, yeah. And kept coaching kids the whole time. And was a 50% custody dad the whole time, right? Everybody else comes before me. I prioritize everyone else's needs before mine, right? So.
And I want to get to the MatSu Borough Assembly, but I guess like between when you stopped doing professional MMA fighting, what happened between there and running for the assembly? Yeah,
I got involved. A good friend, a guy that I consider a mentor, Dave Owens, he's a home inspector. He is the foremost expert in home inspections in the state of Alaska. So Dave asked me to get involved with the MatSu Home Builders Association. And over the years, I just became very passionate about affordable housing issues and how you keep housing affordable, right?
Yeah, and can we talk about that? I assume that growing up in a mobile home, that you definitely have an eye on people who don't have a lot of money.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like we've built close to 100 units of senior housing, more than that, actually, for low-income housing seniors. But housing it touches everybody. There's only two things in this world we can't live without. It's food and shelter, right? Farming is way too hard to work and way too expensive. A poor kid can't get into farming. That stuff is handed down through the generations. Farms are really expensive. Anybody can get into housing. So I like to read. So I started my company, started building, but then started reading a lot about finance and different things, and got involved in the MatSu Home Builders Association, started traveling down to Juneau. I think my first time down to Juneau was 13, 14 years ago as a member of the Home Builders Association. So went on to become the president for the local organization, then the state organization. And then the governor appointed me to the board for Alaska Housing Finance Corporation right after Mike won his first term as governor. And I've just been always super passionate about housing and how you keep it affordable for all, right? And that's how I got involved in paying attention to local politics. We all pay attention to the national scene, right? I think by default, most people that say they pay attention to politics are pretty much just paying attention to the president
100%.
in those races, right? But I started to figure out that, in my opinion, local politics affect our day-to-day lives much more than what happens in Washington, D.C. And then I got a call one day from a kid that I consider a good friend, great kid, Jesse Sumner, and he just said, "Hey, you're signing up for assembly today. You don't have an option. This is what you're doing."
And he was already on the assembly?
Yeah, Jesse had been on there for a couple of years. And so got there, got really passionate about the budget and our finance situation and where we were at and as a local community. And then
what was that? Was it an easy race when you ran the first time for the assembly?
I don't know.
Did you have an opponent?
There was a couple. Yeah, there was. I was the last one in the race. There was already 2 that had signed up.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and say my staff did some research on you. You have 160 relatives in the MatSu Valley.
We got a couple hundred probably, yeah.
Yeah, that you've just no one else running against you has that kind of family connections
we've
with
been
the Valley.
there a long time, and I've been coaching kids a long time. And so the Valley, in my opinion, is just one big family. Like, I honestly feel that way. I don't care where you live. I don't care how you vote, any of that. The Valley is a very close-knit community, in my opinion, at least, right? Maybe, and sometimes some could say that I always see too much positive and everything, but I really do feel that way. Yeah, I was passionate about a few things that were happening at the local level. COVID was in full effect.
You got elected in 2020?
Yeah, I was not impressed with some local governments and how they were handling things. And I'm very big on personal freedoms at all levels. And
yeah. So Jesse Sumner has been on this podcast before.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And the thing that, where he and I went down a rabbit hole was he doesn't believe in seatbelt laws. Do you
I'm
go
not
that
surprised.
Do you go that far as to say, like, personal freedoms, that you don't want people telling you have to wear a seatbelt?
If you're 18 and up and you don't wear a seatbelt, I don't think you should have to.
Do you think you shouldn't be getting tickets? Straight up, Jesse Sumner says that people drive better if they don't have a seatbelt on.
I love Jesse's brain. I love how it works. He probably isn't. He's not lying. I bet you if there was
you could make the analogy with MMA, less gloves, hitting differently.
Yeah, I definitely think children should be strapped in, and I think we should have laws for that. If you're 18 and up, you're old enough to serve in the military and defend this country, and you don't want to wear a seatbelt, I'm totally fine with that. With that being said, I believe in personal freedoms so staunchly that at every level, I would defend that right. And so with COVID, I have nothing but love and respect for anybody that chose to do whatever they chose to do, right? Including my own children who made different decisions, right? My daughter in college, and I'm not even embarrassed to say this, right? My daughter in college chose to get the vaccine, and my other children, adult children, did not. She was going to get kicked out of college if she didn't, and she dreamt her whole life of being an attorney. So I'm not okay with the college telling her she had to do it. I'm not okay with it. And I would defend that right for all of us at any level of life, right? But I respect her decision. I love my daughter. She felt like that was the best decision for her, and so I supported her in it, right? For me, running at that time was really about defending people's personal freedoms. The MatSu Borough Assembly had 3 ordinances on the way that I was adamantly opposed to. One was to get rid of any more gun ranges, never have another gun range in the Valley again. We're the size of West Virginia. Somebody wants to open a gun range, and you go through the process, you should be able to do that. They were going to make the process so impossible you couldn't do it again. The next was a strong mayor form of government. Nothing against any mayors out there. Our mayor in the Valley is absolutely amazing. She's my queen as far as I'm concerned, Miss Edna. But I do think a government runs better when you divide the power amongst 7 rather than give too much to one. And she would do an amazing job as a strong mayor. But what happens when you get the wrong person? Does that make sense? So I think 7.
I hear you 1,000%.
So I think 7 people represent the community's best interest better, and you can take the emotion out of it. One thing I cannot stand about politics is the emotion. Take the emotion out, right? You can do that with 7. You can't always do that with 1. And then the last one was to turn us into a first-class government, which would give the ability for emergency health powers, which is exactly why that was coming forward. And I just think we got to be, I'm not ready to go there. I'm not ready to go there. So I think my community spoke when they elected me. At the time, I think I had the record for most votes ever in an assembly race, at least the highest percentage for sure, by far, in a 3-way race. I think people just wanted to know that they could send someone there that would give them the ability to control their own destiny. And that's all I was trying to do, right? And I would defend that in all aspects of life. Right?
I'll say the same thing I said on Jesse's podcast, because he was very proud of the way the Valley had handled COVID as opposed to Anchorage. But as somebody who worked at the Anchorage VA and worked at the Wasilla VA, I worked at both. I'll tell you what, I had some real bad health outcomes at the Wasilla VA.
We did.
There were definitely some people who suffered from COVID, had long COVID, did very badly, and I saw more of it in Wasilla than I did in Anchorage. Now, having said that, full disclosure, I had a patient die of COVID in Anchorage. So it's not like Anchorage escaped it.
No.
But I was just saying, Wasilla suffered some seriously bad outcomes. Some of these people did not do well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So none of us are going to make it out of here alive. I know that sounds crude, and I'm not trying to sound insensitive, but none of us are going to, we all have an end zone in sight. At some point, none of us make it out of here. And I'm just really big on people's personal freedoms and the government not being involved in them. And I would defend that in any other aspect of life as well, and not just COVID. I'm a huge, staunch believer in personal freedoms and us being able to have the ability to control our own destiny. And I think that's what makes America so beautiful. I really believe the First Amendment is my favorite amendment of all, right? And then I also am wise enough, at least in my own mind, I believe we wouldn't have any of our amendments left if it wasn't for the Second Amendment, right? We live in the greatest place in the world. There's a reason everyone wants to come here. We're all migrants of somewhere, and people came here for freedom, right? And so this is, I ran to help defend it. Right? So because it was going to go the other way. We would have been 4-3. If I lose my race 100%, we vote the other way to become a first-class government. And that's why Jesse called me. He said, hey, you're running.
So the way I first learned about you was because of your ordinance on the MatSu Borough Assembly. That was, and I might get it wrong. So
I ran a lot of ordinances.
But I know the one that was encouraging folks to go to Alaska Regional as opposed to MatSu Regional.
Yes.
And I tell you, I talked about it with Dr. Ann Zink.
In full disclosure, I have more insurance bills coming forward here right now. We've got 8 or 9 more bills we're working on. When I got here, I dropped 10 bills on legal. Only one has been filed so far, but
which I want to talk about that one that's been filed. But first, let's talk about this ordinance. Where's the ordinance come from that was, and I think, I don't know if it was like, if you had municipal insurance or I don't know who it was targeted towards.
It was the last thing I did on the assembly was create a new position where that person would help bid out services. You're not going to get good prices in anything in life if you don't create a good, strong free market. We have to have competition.
100%.
Competition makes all of us better at everything we do, including insurance. And we started looking at cost codes. And if the hospital in Anchorage is 20 to 900% cheaper than the one in the Valley, I want to send all of our employees there. And guess what? We'll drive right by that place, get on a plane, and go to Phoenix too. If it's cheaper for our employees to get a knee surgery done out of town than to get it done in Anchorage.
Hey, I'll tell you what, it is cheaper.
Yeah. And we're a very isolated community up here, the state as a whole, even Anchorage and the Valley, as big as we feel like we're tiny, right? We need free market competition. And so, there's some people that may not like that, but I just want people to get the best price possible for the best service. And you got to have free market. And so that's all I was doing was incentivizing free market. And I had the time.
Full disclosure, I love the ordinance.
And so I just, like I said, I want everybody to get the best deal possible for their money. We're self-insured at the MatSu Borough, right? So who does it affect if we're paying way too much? It affects our employees, right? They're paying for it, not me.
The pushback that I had, though, is that how do you make somebody drive 30 miles?
You don't.
If their insurance is going to, like, from their perspective, it's out of their own pocket, it's the same.
Yeah.
It's like, why am I going to drive 30 miles to save my insurance company money?
So you teach them that it is their pocket because they're self-insured, right? We're one family of, say, 400, right? And it is your pocketbook next year with the premiums, right? And you're only going to drive 30 miles or fly 3,000 miles if it's better price and as good or better service, right? This is like when we go buy a car or anything else we do in life, or we buy a home, we want the best price possible for the best product possible. That's all I was doing, was creating that same free market concept in health insurance. And I guarantee you it's going to benefit our self-insured pool in the long run, right? And we've got some insurance stuff coming forward here that will benefit all Alaskans too, if I can get them to the end zone, right? We got a couple of good bills coming forward. And
do you have somebody carrying them in the house?
I do. I have people that we're visiting with about it. Yeah, we have not. And the thing is, man, I can't stand partisan stuff, but the mentality, but I really believe it was good to hear Congressman Begich the other day talk about how most stuff that gets voted across the table in DC is bipartisan, right? That was really nice to hear. Helping get healthcare costs down should be bipartisan.
100%.
Right? Like all of us should be emotionally invested in that and trying to do the best thing and not worry about what special interests.
And what I will say is that people who are standing up for a dysfunctional system, you're going to find those people on both sides of the aisle, meaning that, that there are people in my party who are definitely part of the problem. I mean, in terms of sticking up for a dysfunctional system and helping to preserve a dysfunctional system that, there's no one can objectively say that America's spending 19% of its GDP on healthcare when no other country comes close. And our outcomes are not the best.
Right.
Like we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I agree. And how do you fix that? You create that. You fix that with competition. Right? That's how you fix it, right? And so you have to make it really easy on people to find the best product for the best price. That's what you have to do, right? And there's a lot of states that have done it. On both sides, they've done this, right? So we'll talk more about health insurance after I drop my bills. Or maybe you're figuring out, I don't like to talk about my bills before they drop.
So let's talk about your bill that's dropped.
The media is all over this building they got flies on every wall.
I know.
I'm a quiet guy.
I know.
All right. I'm a quiet guy. I'm humble. I'm not a bragger. Nobody's going to know about my bills until they're read across. You know what I mean? Like I owe it to my constituents and the residents of Alaska to put forth good ideas to help balance the budget. I'm here to fight for the PFD, things like that. And finance is my area. I'm obsessed with budgets, but I'm not going to go out there and talk about it.
Hey, your first bill that was read across, I just want to say that the landmine, I think, tweeted the night before.
That's because I gave that to him.
Okay, so he does this tweet, like rumor is that Rob Yundt is going to drop something major. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, my office checked.
Yeah.
We checked the next morning. We were like, hey, let's look and see what was filed.
Yeah.
And when I found out what was filed, I was very exciting in the office.
I love Jeff, and he knows I feel this. You know what I love about Jeff? He'll shoot holes at anybody.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I love. I respect that, right? And I want true journalists don't pick favorites. True journalists do investigative research, and they'll sling mud at anybody. That's the First Amendment, man. We have the most beautiful country in the world because we're allowed free speech. I appreciate what Jeff does because of that. He'll sling mud at anyone and keep the whole system honest. He's not out to protect one side or the other. So I said, hey, if you want to look like a genius tomorrow night, here, tweet tonight but I didn't tell him what it was.
Okay, well, hey, so for listeners who maybe don't understand what an S-Corp loophole is, who don't understand what your bill does, can you just break it down?
Yeah. So the tax structure in Alaska for oil. Well, let's go back even farther than when it's created. Our Constitution clearly states that we must, not that we may, but that we must get maximum benefit for our natural resources. And so we've got a tax structure that's been in place longer than I've been alive. There's been tweaks, but it's been there a long time, right? We, as a state, like I came here to protect the PFD. I am here to protect the PFD, right? I really believe in my heart that we can get back to the good old days. And that might be painful for some to hear because it might mean less money to special interests. But the bottom line is they accidentally created an environment where we would get full market value, which is what I would refer to it as today. But when the Constitution came out, it was maximum. But in today's language, I would just say market value, full market value. They never took into consideration that anybody would work in that industry not as a C corporation. And so most people don't really know the difference between an S Corp and a C Corp. And so just the biggest difference is that a C Corp can have unlimited investors and an S Corp can only have 100. That's really the biggest difference, okay? I don't care if you're a butterfly. If you're in the natural resource game, you should pay the same as an S Corp or C Corp. To me, nobody intended for it to be any different. This was not done on purpose.
C Corps are like ConocoPhillips and BP and like the bit.
There's a bunch of
those were the companies that were doing most of the business in Alaska for a long time.
Yeah,
and they were paying.
They were doing all
corporate.
They were doing all the.
They were paying the corporate income tax.
And so now there's an S-Corp company, which is, and I'm not going to even name them because I think they're a fantastic company. I'm not out to get them. I'm not here to attack nobody.
But they're doing a lot of business in Alaska.
Yeah, more than two now. They just bought out another company 3 months ago. And We have 743,000 people that own our natural resources. And I'm going to defend every one of them. Period. End of the story. We're the shareholders. We own the product. We're Alaskans. This state does not exist if we don't get something for it. It does not exist. There's only 2 states in the entire country that have neither a statewide sales tax or neither a statewide income tax. It's us and New Hampshire. New Hampshire gets away with it because they got unbelievably high property taxes, which I don't think is the best way to do it either. And then they tax the heck out of the investment industry, like banking and different stuff. So anyways, that's not what we chose to do. We chose to get a return on investment for our natural resources. And it was an accident, but it's been being talked about in this building forever. The Commissioner of Revenue 4 years ago on record said this is a problem. You know what I mean? And we need to, I think her exact words were, we need to create parity in the industry. And parity, for those that don't know, just means basically fairness. That's all I'm trying to do. I have 6 children. I love them all the same. I don't treat one differently than the others. You could bring me 50 more tax structures. Okay, if you're pulling oil out of the ground, you should pay the same as the rest. We should all be treated the same. That's all this is. The funny thing is, to me, this bill is the biggest bag of nothing. It's literally all it is common sense. Mm-hmm. But because of the emotion, sometimes people try to make it seem like it's a bigger deal than it is. It's not a big deal at all.
Why do you think that the far right media landscape is trying to brand you as like, you're all about taxes? The first thing you're going to do is like install more taxes. Like, why are they doing that?
Yeah, the taxes, but I don't even care why. The media needs me way more than I need them. And I'll say that again for anyone listening. The media needs me way more than I need them, right? And that goes for all of us. They don't exist if they don't have us, right? So I've been playing the media for a long time. There's 2 types of journalism. There's journalism and there's investigative journalism, right? When Trump said fake news, he wasn't lying. And it's on both sides. Fake news exists on both sides. Does that make sense? And if you're going to write about a bill, read the damn thing first, because there's articles out there that make it seem like I'm trying to tax every S-Corp in Alaska. I would never, ever be okay with that. You're talking about hairstylists, Uber drivers, tattoo artists, attorneys. You're talking about every small business in the state of Alaska. No way. We should not do that. We have natural resources. They don't go back in the ground. When me and you were kids, we're similar age. When me and you were kids, nobody thought we were going to run out of gas in Cook Inlet. Well, okay, we're getting, it's a conversation, right? We're getting there. Fields become brown. That's going to happen in our kids' or grandkids' generation on the slope. In between now and then, we need to get maximum benefit. I feel like we do. I'm going to use ConocoPhillips as an example. I think they are the most outstanding company in the state of Alaska, best partner to us that you could ever have, right? That's just my personal opinion.
What they're doing with the road on the North Slope.
Hey, we all big brother people from time to time. They'll work through that, and let them work through that, right? But they are a darn good partner to the state of Alaska fiscally. They're doing well. We're doing well, right? It's not fair to them or any other company that say, hey, you have to pay this, but this company doesn't, right? When articles are written that make it seem like I'm trying to tax every S-Corp, to that I'll just say this: read the damn bill, and it clearly states that's not the case. And if you got questions, call me. I am the easiest guy in the world to reach. My cell phone's everywhere, right? I pride myself on communication and getting back to people. And if there's people out there writing articles that got questions, pick up the damn phone.
Okay, so Sarah Palin, when she started off, speaking of politicians from Wasilla, when she started off, she went rogue from the Republican Party. She helped change the tax structure on oil in Alaska, basically called out corruption. And the thing is, people are like, oh, Rob Yundt is doing the Sarah Palin. He is going to go rogue. He's going to get the maximum from the resources, and he's setting himself up. And
yeah, I'm not going rogue, not at all. I don't believe in crony capitalism, right? Crony capitalism, for anyone out there doesn't know, basically means the government is picking winners and creating losers. That's what we're doing. And it was unintentional. It was an accident. Nobody meant for this to happen. And why the hell do I have to do this? This has been being talked about in this building for 4 years. This should be like, I would think every person elected would say, let's treat everybody the same in the same industry. This is common sense. And I have nothing but respect for everybody that's here and has been here in the past, but that's probably not a fair comparison to say that I'm trying to do what she's doing. I don't think we need to renegotiate the whole structure. I think we have a very good structure right now that works well for us and encourages development, and more development is how we get more in the pipe, right? And so, but what I will say is this, I absolutely 100% believe all should be treated the same. I'm a proud fiscal conservative. You're not fiscally conservative if you create one winner and pick a bunch of losers. You're also not fiscally conservative if you tell 743,000 people that, hey, this was done on accident, but we're going to continue to allow one tax vehicle to get a big discount. And it's not about one company to me. It could be 10 more companies in the future. It's a tax vehicle is what it is, that we're accidentally carved out and said, you're the golden child. You're the winner. You get our stuff at a discount. That's not fiscally conservative. You know what I mean?
So speaking of revenue commissioners, I had Sarah Palin's revenue commissioner on a few weeks ago, and Pat Galvin, and he talked about what typically happens with big oil fields and why and how that hasn't happened in Alaska. He says what usually happens is you have big elephant fields, you have legacy oil companies that come in because they have the money to lay down this major infrastructure, and they pump out enormous amounts of oil. He was like, and then what happens usually is then you have smaller companies come in, and they, in aggregate, if you have enough small companies, you may get the same amount of oil coming out, but it's being spread across a lot of small companies. And, the legacy ones have moved on to something else, but you've got all these other small companies. But that didn't happen in Alaska. What happened is we had basically this one S-Corp company that came in, and we didn't end up with lots of competition like you were talking about before. He's like, we didn't end up with that. And that really we had an unusual progression of the way things happen.
Yeah, and for me, this is a very simple way of looking at it, but I don't care if they're a big company or a small company. I don't care if they're a C Corp, an S Corp, or a Butterfly Corp. I don't care, right? Do you remove oil from the ground that's owned by 740,000 people? The answer is yes or no. If you answered yes, everybody needs treated the same. If not, that is exactly what crony capitalism is. That is the government choosing winners and creating losers. Unintentionally, it was done on accident. It's time to fix it. It's $544 million since the inception. Since it started, we started having S-Corps here, right? $544 million. Department of Revenue's estimate for next year, $133 million. That's $732 per resident already, and another $179 per resident next year alone. I'm here to defend 740,000 people. I'm not here to defend any sort of special interest or any sort of crony capitalism, and I will have that debate in any grocery store in all 40 districts. Anybody who wants to walk into any grocery store, any author of any articles out there that forgot to read the bill before they commented or wrote articles, I will walk into any grocery store in the state of Alaska, set up a booth, and discuss this with, the beauty of a grocery store? And we're all guilty of this. Me and you, I guarantee you are too. You don't even know where I'm going with this. But we all know who we're talking to before we talk to them. When we go knock on a door, we know everything about it. We have technology that we can pay for. So when we're out there campaigning, we know who we're going to see. We know if there are people or not. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I'll walk in a grocery store, set up a booth, and have this conversation with anybody where I don't know who they are. I don't know anything about it. And I'll have an honest, open conversation, and anybody's welcome to come and debate with or against me in all 40 districts on this.
100%. And I've literally told my campaign manager before when I was like, I did not sleep well last night. I need easy doors today. You do not send me to any difficult doors. I was like, I don't want to have arguments with people. I'm too tired. I want to knock on doors of people who like me. Please.
Yeah. Yep. I shot from the hip, man. I went to a million doors, a lot of doors that I didn't even know who
That's what you talk about. Yeah. So you ran against David Wilson. What was the instigation there? Why?
Great guy. Yeah. And I have nothing against David, and you can go back and see, I'm not a negative guy. I don't campaign on negativity. I didn't run on it. I never said anything negative about him. I just felt like I had things that would benefit Alaska. That's it, right?
Well, I mean, for me, from an Anchorage perspective, it was like David Wilson was part of the bipartisan majority, and somebody ran who said that I wouldn't be part of that bipartisan majority.
Yeah. And I'm not. I'm caucusing with the Republican Senate caucus, but I can work with anybody. I treat everybody with respect. I'm going to treat everybody like gold. I don't care if you're from the Valley or from Anchorage or from Kotzebue. It doesn't matter to me. We're all in this together. This is one state. And we need to all remember that, right? So, yeah, but I ran up against a great guy. I have nothing personal against him. And so
What was one thing that you thought that he did that was like the downfall, like why he needed to be taken out?
I have no idea. I've never paid attention to any of it. Honestly, like I'm here to fix the PFD. I'm here to fix the budget. Budgets are what I'm good at. I'm not good. Like his expertise is in health and he's phenomenal with it. Super great. And I'm grateful for all that he did. I'm here to work on finances. That's what I'm here for. And people will see that common theme with the bills that I'm dropping. They're either going to A, increase the size of the PFD, or B, decrease people's cost of living. So we talk about like insurance stuff. We got some insurance bills coming forward, right? That will lower the cost of different things in Alaska, not just healthcare, but even other things, right? It's liability insurance, workman's comp, whatever it may be. And they get passed on to all the consumers pay that too. I've been picking up pennies my whole life. I watched my mom pick up pennies her whole life. Like I want everybody in Alaska to be empowered financially. I have a bill coming forward that will probably drop next week that I'm so excited about. That's going to give 743,000 people the opportunity to invest in a deal together if they choose to. Nobody's going to be forced to. But I really want to make people's lives better financially because at the end of the day, we all got to go into the grocery store and buy food for our kids or for ourselves and our families or whatever it may be. And you want to empower somebody, help them financially. I'm a firm believer that people spend their money better than the government. Outside of basic services, I think the government's gotten too big. We're hearing all this uproar right now about Doge, but this current administration will probably never get anywhere near the total amount of jobs cut that Bill Clinton did. Bill Clinton cut like 400,000 federal positions or something, a whole bunch. He did that because he knew he had to want to lower taxes and stuff, and he wanted to empower private sector, which it does. It does empower more people overall. And financially, I just want to help people. Does that make sense? I want to help them be able to create a good future for themselves, and that's what I'm going to be focused on. And I don't give a damn if the media likes it or not.
Hey, last question.
Yes, sir.
Any book that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Oh, man. Just trying to think. I think my favorite book that I've read lately is The Boys in the Boat.
Okay.
It was a pretty cool story, man.
Yeah.
That book put me in tears a couple times.
Yeah. I just had that author. I was at an event where that author spoke.
Yeah.
What is his name?
It's for anybody out there. It's a story about the United States putting together an Olympic champion team. It was a JV team. They were JV at the University of Washington. They went on to win the Olympics, and they did it at a time. I despise racism. I'm going to tell you, I don't want to swear. I'm about to swear. I effing hate racism in all forms, right? It's that what those kids were having to deal with and one of their teammates at that time, and going to Germany and beating the Germans at their sport, right? Man, that's probably the Boys in the Boat. If anybody
Daniel James Brown.
Yeah, if anybody wants to read a good book, that I'm telling you, it put me in tears a couple times. And we spend so much time. Social media has been it's a cancer to this society. Back then, you read this book and you're going to realize how much harder our grandparents and great grandparents had it than we have it. We have it so easy in life. In living in this amazing first world country, we have it so easy that it gives people the ability to they have so much time on their hands they can sit around and complain all day. I'm not a complainer, man. I'm a doer. I'm not going to complain. But that book was very touching. I read it a couple of times, actually. And I would recommend that one right now. So,
Senator Rob Yundt, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@akleg.gov or call 907-465-4940.